Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Today I thought I'd just give you some fall fishing tips. And these are not just necessarily for lakes or rivers. They're good tips just in general that come into play a lot more in the fall period. The first has to do just with current. You know, I'm actually fishing a river right here. And generally speaking, your cold water period, so once you get into like that post turnover period into the winter months, current becomes less and less of a factor in terms of the fish using it to feed. I think a lot of fish actually try to stay out of it. They don't necessarily leave it altogether, but they're not in the heavy current. You know, in the summer months, they'll look for that heavy current, whether you're on a reservoir or a river, or even a natural lake where you've got wind-blown current just positions the fish. Well, it positions the fish in the cold water periods as well, but it's usually not in the current. It's outside of the current. So maybe you've got, let's say a wing dam. The fish will be usually in that deep hole because that's where they're wintering. They're not on top of the wing dam or the front side of the wing dam where they might be during the summer months. The same thing goes if you have a current seam. Like I'm kind of fishing a current seam right here, and the left side is out of the current. The right side, there's a little bit of an outside bend. That current is coming, clipping it and coming off the bank. So a lot of times it's these little slacker water current breaks that are going to be key places to fish during the colder water periods. So that's the main thing. Don't necessarily go looking for the heaviest current. If you are looking for the heaviest current, look for the areas that are completely slack outside of that, you know, where there's really good current breaks. So that's one tip. Another tip has to do with all these leaves that are on the surface that you see floating. They definitely can be a nuisance during the fall periods. They really can be a pain in the butt because they're also on the bottom of the lake, and you can catch them with your bait. So in some instances, you can't necessarily throw the equipment that you would want to be throwing. So maybe like a crankbait, but if I threw a crankbait, I'd have a leave on every cast, so it's not going to work. You can definitely go with your Texas rig baits or your jigs, like this little finesse jig. Those are going to work great, or your baits that are not going to come in contact with the bottom, jerk baits, things like that. But you're going to have to choose something that stays out of the leaves. Now, what I want to really point out with the leaves, though, is you can use them to your advantage. And again, this is not just river fishing. But if I look at the leaves, almost all the leaves are from where the boat is in. If I look out here, there's no leaves. There's a handful of leaves. So what's happening is the leaves that are falling in all over, you can see them falling out of the tree, they're hitting the river current, and the current is actually pushing them and depositing them into the slacker water areas. So I can actually use it to see the seam. You're going to have like an actual seam from the leaves. Now, this isn't just a fall tip, I guess. You can do this in the summer if you've got a lot of submerging grass that's been ripped up. But because the leaves are floating on the surface, it shows me the current seams that I need to see. So whether it's the seam coming off this outside bend, or maybe I've got a little bay where it bops in, you'll be able to see where the leaves are deposited and get stuck in your eddies. Those can be really, really key little areas. So if you pay attention to all of the leaves that are floating by, what you'll find is they actually are showing you. It's almost like now all of a sudden you have something showing you the current and the current flow and the current seams. So use that to your advantage, and you'll find that that really, really comes into play. Now, another thing has to do with the objects that you're fishing. Most lakes, you start to lose your submerging grass, your emerging grass, all of that starts dying off. Generally speaking, grass does not become nearly as big of a player as it was during the summer months. So you're going to be looking for your hard target objects, things that will absorb heat, ideally objects that are facing the sun for most of the day. So whether you've got a sun exposed bank that's got rock on it, or lay down trees, things like that become a much bigger factor. You're not going to be looking as much either for shade. Like a lot of times people think shade is the key to catching bass. I think shade is still a factor in the cold water periods, but the shade is going to be just enough for the bass to like cover their eyes. You know, it's like their whole body will be in the sun, and then they're just going to cover their eyes. So you'd only need a little tree, a little lay down limb, things like that. You don't necessarily need a big overhanging tree, because that's actually not necessarily what the bass is looking for. That's a much bigger factor in the spring and the summer months. Another thing to keep pay attention to is where you're getting runoff from. Now, if I go long enough, what you'll find is I've got actual like drain tubes that come in. You know, where I'm fishing, I'm kind of in a residential area, so there's like all the roads have little drains and ditches, and those drains and ditches are going to funnel warm water that's up on the land into the river. So depending on what your conditions are like in the area, they can be a major factor. So like in my neck of the woods, the last 2 days we've had a little bit of rain, not a ton, but enough that every time I come to one of these drain pipes, there is flow coming in that pipe. And if there's flow, I know that that's runoff that's coming from all the roads and the, you know, the lots and the houses that are up there, which is going to be warmer. I know right now water temp here is about 48 degrees. The air temp today is like 55. So I'm willing to bet that that runoff that's coming in is warmer runoff. So areas like, here's one actually right here that's coming in. It's not a defined tube, but if you listen, you can actually hear it. It's like a waterfall. You can see the tube is actually way up the hill there, and the water is running down the rock and running in right around where these rocks are right here. There's not a lot of water, but there's a little bit of water coming in. So that's the type of thing that in the fall, any of your cold water periods, winter, fall, spring, if you've got warmer runoff coming in, you can get schools of fish that'll be positioned right in front of those. Now there's barely a trickle coming in that one, so I don't know that that one's going to be a big enough player, but you better believe I'll make a cast right there just to see if I can generate a strike. It's little things like that that really will increase your odds of catching fish in the winter months. You know, it's a period where the fish generally are just not that active. You know, a lot of times you got to make a lot of casts to a prime target, and then if you can get that fish to react, if there's more than one, you can catch multiple fish from the same spot. But if you only made one cast, a lot of times you wouldn't know that there's actually a good school of fish there. It's just that important to make multiple casts and like finally hit one on the head. If you can do that, you're going to generate that school into becoming a little bit more active. But those are just a handful of tips that are really straightforward, really simple tips that come into play when you're talking about fall fishing, talking about winter. You know, if you can apply those, you're going to increase your odds and increase the number of times you're going to come into high percentage areas. Like if you just get in an area and put the trolling motor or just float around, you might catch a fish or two. But if you really concentrate on those prime areas, you're going to increase the number of bites that you get throughout the day. And the reality is, especially in the cold water period, if you go from 3 or 4 bites a day to 7 or 8 bites a day, that's a pretty dang good day of fishing. I'll take that almost every time I go out. So let me know in the comments section, do you guys have a few other cold water tips that you feel like sharing with the rest of the viewers? If so, throw it in the comments section. Otherwise, I appreciate all you watching on a regular basis, and stay tuned. We'll have a new video coming out tomorrow for you.